Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 patch 2.6.6 season 18 Demon Hunter build guide. What we'll cover in this video is a Natalya rapid fire build that emerged throughout season 17 and is competitive with the Legacy of Nightmares rapid fire Demon Hunter. This is one of the most powerful Demon Hunter builds in the game, and while it now may be slightly outperformed by the Legacy of Nightmares, or rather Legacy of Dreams version, this is something that you can use to segue into your Legacy of Dreams, or use before your Legacy of Dreams is at full power. Or, if you just prefer this playstyle, it is a little bit different. Now, in this video, we're going to cover the best gear and skills that you will want to rock this build. However, these guides get updated, and rather than upload a new video with just one or two little changes, what I do is I modify in the video description below a D3 planner link, and it's that link below that you're going to want to follow for the most up-to-date gear and skill recommendations for this build. So first off, an overview of the Natalya set. This is all about Rain of Vengeance. Now yes, this is still a rapid fire build, but Rain of Vengeance will be important to activating our buffs. So our 2-piece bonus reduces the cooldown of Rain of Vengeance by 4 seconds when you hit with any kind of attack, hatred generating or hatred spending. The 4-set bonus makes Rain of Vengeance deal more damage, but that won't be relevant to us. The 6-piece bonus is what we're after, combined with the 2-piece. After casting Rain of Vengeance, you deal a ton more damage and take a bunch less damage for 10 seconds. Rain of Vengeance has a significant cooldown, but we'll be making use of the 2-piece bonus to ensure we are always under the effect of the 6-piece buff. Outside of this, you'll see a lot of similarities with the Legacy of Nightmares rapid fire build. We're going to want the Sin Seeker's Quiver. Rapid fire no longer has a channel cost and deals a bunch more damage. This is what will help enable us to sit in place and channel without running low on resource. In our cube, we'll want to take the Wojania Psalter. This is another buff to rapid fire, and because it's a stacking buff, this means that we build up momentum. We really want to sit in place and channel to get to our max damage. Unlike most Demon Hunter builds that are fairly mobile, with this build, you want to be able to sit in place and just attack. We're going to take the Mantle of Channeling as both an offensive and defensive buff. While we're channeling, we deal more damage and we take less damage. Further, in our cube, we'll want an Aquila Cuirass. More damage reduction. We're going to want to be maintaining our resource so that we are always benefiting from this damage reduction. We'll also be taking an Elusive Ring. After casting Shadow Power, Smokescreen, or Vault, we take a bunch less damage for 8 seconds. And while Demon Hunters typically use Vault to activate this, with this build we'll most likely be relying on a different skill, which we'll cover when we get to the skills. Because we'll be using the Grenade rune on rapid fire, we're taking the Hellcat Waistguard to turbo buff our grenade damage. Next we'll be working in a Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose. This gives us more damage when we're standing still and more toughness when we're moving. When we're standing still, we're channeling, therefore we're going to benefit from this damage buff. While we're moving, either to reposition or to retreat, then we're going to get that toughness buff. We're looking to maintain 100% uptime on Vengeance, therefore we're taking a Dawn. This gives us huge cooldown reduction to Vengeance. And then lastly, we're taking the Nemesis Bracers. These aren't critical to the build, but they help us trigger a few more elites, and thus progress through the Rift faster. Now we'll get back to gems, legendary gems, and exactly what we want on every piece of gear in a bit. Let's first take a look at our skills. And it all starts with Rapid Fire Bombardment. This will cost us 20 hatred, but as long as we keep channeling and don't release, that's all it costs. This is the Grenade rune, which is going to synergize with our gear and skill choices. Next, because this is a Natalya build, we gotta work in Rain of Vengeance. But again, this won't be a significant source of damage for us, so we're gonna pick the Flying Strike rune in order to crowd control enemies. Remember that we want to be popping Rain of Vengeance often enough to always be under the effects of the buff of Natalya's 6-piece. Next, we're taking Vengeance Dark Heart. The most important thing here is that Vengeance is giving us a 40% damage buff, and the Dark Heart rune is giving us 50% damage reduction. Next, for mobility, we're going to take Vault Tumble. When we need mobility, either to escape or to progress further down a rift, we are going to use Vault, and we're going to use the Tumble rune in order to basically get 2 vaults for the price of 1. Just make sure you are vaulting that second time within your window, and you're going to learn to time it to make the most use of your vault and your resource. In other words, what you can do is vault, run a little bit, and then wait about a little bit over 5 seconds before you vault again. You'll see the little timer counting down above your hotbar. Next, we're going to take Smokescreen Vanishing Powder. This is what we'll be using to activate our elusive ring buff. While Smokescreen typically costs Discipline, the Vanishing Powder rune instead gives it a 6-second cooldown, which is more than enough than we need for our 8-second buff on the elusive ring. Remember, when we're channeling, sitting in place, we can't be vaulting around to activate the elusive ring. Smokescreen is an easy way to keep that buff up. And then lastly, because we're going to be sitting in place, we're going to be spending our discipline on Caltrops Bait the Trap. While we are standing within our Caltrops, we gain 10% extra crit chance. That'll translate into a little bit of extra damage that we can always be benefiting from. Because we're sitting, we're channeling, we lay some Caltrops. Onto our passives, we will need Grenadier. We're using grenades. This makes grenades do more damage. Next, we'll take Ambush, one of the Demon Hunter's best passives. 40% additional damage on the first hit and sometimes subsequent hits against enemies. We'll be taking Call the Weak for 20% extra damage against enemies. Remember, Flying Strike, Rain of Vengeance is going to be crowd controlling enemies. Call the Weak will then be able to trigger on those enemies. And odds are enemies are going to get pretty close to you anyway. We'll be using a Bane of the Trapped, so that'll also be synergizing. Then lastly, we're taking Leech for some life per hit. We're sitting, we're channeling, we ideally don't want to have to move away to retreat, so having some life per hit really helps. Alright, let's go back to our gear. So, for our legendary gems, we're going to want a Bane of the Trapped. Arguably the best gem in the game, this gives us a huge damage multiplier against crowd-controlled enemies. And at level 25, you gain an aura that crowd controls enemies near you. Typically on a Demon Hunter, this isn't the case, but on this build, you're probably going to find enemies coming quite close to you. So even if they're not being affected by Flying Strike, they should be affected by this. Next, we'll want either a Bane of the Stricken or a Bane of the Powerful. In easier content, you go with a Bane of the Powerful, and then you eventually progress into a Bane of the Stricken if it is taking you long to complete a rift. If your Bane of the Powerful bonus is dropping off, then you start swapping to Bane of the Stricken. Far too many people make the mistake of taking a Bane of the Stricken at GR 70, GR 80. You only start benefiting from Bane of the Stricken more than Bane of the Powerful if it's really taking a long time to kill enemies. This gem was introduced to the game to solve the problem of it taking literal minutes to kill the Rift Guardian. The Bane of the Stricken is a gem that deals increasing damage the longer you're hitting an enemy. Whereas Bane of the Trapped, once active, is always giving you that flat damage buff, so it takes a while before a Bane of the Stricken catches up to the amount of damage that a Bane of the Powerful does. And it's not even sufficient to just catch up to that damage, then it has to make up for all the time that it spent dealing less damage than a Bane of the Powerful. Now with some builds, you'll swap to a Bane of the Stricken faster than with other builds, typically those with high attack speed. But if you're running any kind of speed content, a Bane of the Powerful will most likely benefit you a lot more than a Bane of the Stricken. And then lastly, we have the Pain Enhancer. This is another high Greater Rift gem. The main effect, the bleed, is nothing. The damage is not significant. The reason we take this is to gain Blood Frenzy, which gives you attack speed for every bleeding enemy within 20 yards. So when does this gem become useful? When you have a lot of bleeding enemies near you, which typically only happens at very high Greater Rift levels, when enemies have so much health that it really takes long to kill them. So you have a bunch of bleeding enemies around you, gaining incredible attack speed. At lower Greater Rifts, in speed content, you're not going to go with a Pain Enhancer. An alternative gem that you can go with is the Taeguk, which is for channeling builds. This will give you more damage as you channel. Then for your regular gems, in your helm you'll want a diamond for cooldown reduction to help you reach the cooldown reduction breakpoint of Perma Vengeance, which we'll discuss in a moment. Then for your chest and pants, if you want more toughness, you go with diamonds. If you want more damage, you go with emeralds. Again, if you're doing easier content, speed content, emeralds are the way to go. If you're pushing your limits in Greater Rifts and you really need that extra toughness, then you go diamonds. As for the exact stats that you want on every piece of gear, for shoulders, dexterity, vitality, area damage, and cooldown reduction. Now, talking cooldown breakpoints, to achieve permanent vengeance with a Dawn in your cube, you'll need a total of 36 to 37% cooldown reduction. However, you might want to go for even more cooldown reduction, and that's what we'll recommend, in order to have more uptime on Smokescreen, and also to further help bring down that cooldown on Rain of Vengeance. With the setup we recommend here, you'll have only about 1.5 seconds of downtime on Rain of Vengeance while channeling Rapid Fire. But once you finish killing your enemies and you're ready to move on to the next pack, then you're not channeling anymore. So you want to basically make sure that by the time you reach the next pack you want to fight, and you sit down and you begin channeling, you effectively instantaneously can get back your Natalya's 6-piece. On our helm, we'll take Dex, crit chance, life per hit. On our amulet, fire, crit, crit. On our gloves, crit, crit, area, cooldown. Although at lower paragon and before you get augments, instead of area damage, you can go with dexterity. The higher in paragon you go, and therefore the more dexterity you get via paragon, and the more dexterity you're able to add via caldicens, the more you're able to replace the dexterity on your gear for other stats. On your chest, dexterity, elite damage reduction, and then either vitality or all resist. On your bracers, fire, crit chance, life per hit, either vitality or all resist. The reason here we're recommending all resist instead of vitality is because with all of our life per hit, toughness that comes from all resist becomes more important than toughness that comes via vitality. Your toughness is a measure of how much damage you can take. So whether you have 2 million health or 1 million health but reduce all damage by 50%, it's the same thing. It's the same toughness. You effectively have 2 million hit points. However, when it comes to healing, healing is much more effective when your toughness comes mostly from damage reduction. If you regain 500,000 hit points and you have a total of 2 million hit points, you're only gaining back 25% of your total health pool. Whereas if you have 1 million health but 2 million toughness, then you're regaining half of your health pool. On our Hellcat Waistguard, Dex, Vitality, All Resist, Life. Our pants, Dex, Vitality, All Resist. Boots, Dex, Vitality, All Resist, Armor. For our Compass Rose, we're looking for Raw Damage, Dex, crit chance, crit damage. For our Natalya's ring, raw damage, crit chance, crit damage. For our Dawn, 10% damage, increased attack speed, cooldown reduction, but again, if you are lower in Paragon, if you don't have the augments, then Dex is very important. And for our Sin Seekers, Dex, attack speed, crit chance, area damage, cooldown. For our Paragon point priority, get your total move speed up to 25%, then dump everything into dexterity. For offense, start with that cooldown reduction, then crit chance and crit damage, trying to keep your global crit chance and crit damage at a 1 to 10 ratio, then attack speed. For defense, all resist, life, armor, life regen. And for utility, life per hit, area damage, resource cost reduction, gold find. And that is going to wrap up this guide. As a quick reminder, you only have until September 1st to get your name on the Rhykker Raiders 2019 t-shirt and banner. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Rhykker Raiders for more Diablo guides.